Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Real Influencers Project. I'm your host, Craig Reynolds, and with me today is one of the greatest voices of all time, Mr. Lenny Batycki. Lenny, how are you today?
Doing great, Craig. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, are you kidding me? It's a no-brainer to have you here. It's funny. We live about 5 miles apart, but getting a hold of you and tracking you down is very, very challenging. So thank you for taking the time this morning to sit down and chat with me.
Life has been really busy, and I like it busy. Chasing grassroots racing like we did when we were kids, just transferring over from BMX to car racing.
Well, let's start there. You grew up in South Florida, correct?
Yep, Hollywood, Florida.
Okay, and obviously we met through racing BMX bikes. And as I was getting older, you were retiring out of the pro class, but you were really picking up your microphone skills, I guess I should say. Give me a little bit about how you started racing and then that transition and what influenced you to start, speaking.
Well, first off, I got to argue with you. I don't think you've ever gotten older. You're still that great kid that I knew back then. Wearing glasses now, that's all.
Oh, I've gotten older, trust me, and I weigh a heck of a lot more now too.
Oh, man. Well, age even catches up to the beautiful people, I guess. Well, BMX started for me like I think a lot of kids in the mid-'70s. We were stacking up cinder blocks and jumping our bikes out into the Neverlands. And a kid down the street named Charlie Nichols could do what they called a side hack. I don't know why they call it a side hack, but it was a kick out. And I thought, wow, that's the greatest thing in the world. And we found out he raced BMX, and then chased him to the racetrack and saw how cool that was, or what we thought was that cool, and just started by jumping dirt jumps now at tracks and breaking parts and seeing how we could do things and getting the opportunity to compete and starting to feel like, okay, I didn't do enough, but I could do more, and maybe I could do better and get my world growing. And that's what happened with BMX.
And you made it all the way to the pro class as well.
Yeah. Made it to the pro class. Actually, made it to the number 3 amateur in the country back when the NBL had 16 and over. It was national number 3. And the marker is John Pyan was number 5 that same year. So
wow.
I was in a company that I could be ahead of a guy like that. But in the winter, I tore up my shoulder. And that really was one of those influencers that wasn't a person. It was a direction shift, because my body was starting to tell me this is over on competition. My brain didn't catch that, though. So a couple of years I rehabbed, tried to be a B pro, started to do okay that way. But also during the downtime, I got to pick up a microphone. My parents were part of a couple of parents group that ran a small track for less than a year. But that was the time somebody said, we don't have an announcer. Could you do this? And I had been playing announcer in the grandstands for friends of mine. We'd go to these tracks where now my shoulder's tore up. I can't make it out of the motos. So I would sit there in the semis and mains and just try to out-announce the father that was up on the PA trying to be an announcer. And as you know, back then, dads would maybe have a cold 1 or 6 while they were trying to announce, and wouldn't sound very good by the time the semis came up. So more and more people started sitting around me. And that was really kind of just fun. And then I got to do it on the microphone at the track I'm describing. And wow, that was even more fun. And then it just became something I did from there. But, announcing probably has gone back to when I was 5 years old. And I know you want to know about influencers. So let me give you some.
Because for me, I think when we look at influencers today, people look at social media and what's being sold, and I want to live that lifestyle. But what you're saying is what this is all about, is our influencers in our life, we don't pay for it. I said some other interview that it takes a village, not just to grow or to raise a child, but it takes a village, period, to support each other and grow everybody. And this is the part that I love about this, is that you had that influence because you hurt your shoulder, but you still had this ability to do something, and these people love listening to you. So you were influenced by them by not even realizing it, that, hey, I'm gonna entertain everybody, and I'm going to be great at it. And you don't even think that far ahead of it, I'm sure. But knowing you, you were in fantastic right off the bat.
Well, I was fortunate to have people think I was fantastic right off. I've heard a few of those old recordings, and they're very much not that good. But that's what
We are our
you go.
own worst critics.
Yes, yes, we are. But I started, in five, listening to wrestling announcers, and I thought that was cool. They could make what looked like pretty boring thing become very exciting by their dynamic use of language. So that kind of caught my attention, and I would act like that as a child. Then, as I came up in BMX, there were good announcers, guys before even Charlie Liskey time. You had Bill Pippin. When I went to the '78 NBA indoor grands at the LA Coliseum, Bill Pippin could make the energy in that room just come right together. His voice captivated everything. And if Mark Pippin, our great friend and all, is watching, your father really showed me a lot of what a BMX announcer could do. And then likewise, Julie Justice's dad, Gary Justice, he and Frank Nolte, they were the NBL announcers. And when they would introduce the pros and get to the eighth pro, and they would hit the note, ladies and gentlemen, the NBL pros, you just froze. You had goosebumps on, and it was just so powerful. And I thought, wow, that is really cool how they, both of Pippin, Justice, Nolte, they lifted the sport with their voices. Simultaneously, on the motocross side, you had Larry Huffman, who was, a world-class motocross announcer. And I could listen to him every now and then through television and stuff on how he was making motocross sound really good. So those influential voices, even though they didn't speak to me, they spoke to my soul of how this could be you. This could really be something you could do. And when I got that microphone in my hand at 16, back in '79, '80, and got to play a little bit on the microphone and see their positive reaction. I've never been one to feel like criticizing somebody on the microphone was the right way. You're too powerful. You've got too much that you can slap down on somebody. So you've got to find a way to lift everybody else up. If you want to not talk about somebody, lift everybody else up and make it good. And when you start feeling positive reaction from everybody, man, that is something you want more and more and more.
I'll admit, when I was a pro and you were on the microphone, or even as an amateur, if I was getting into the gate and I knew you were announcing, that was another incentive for me to make sure I got out front, because you're so good at telling that story on the track in 35 or 40 seconds, man. You had it. You've got to knock all of this information out, but you would tell it in a story and such that I'm racing going, oh my God, how did he know that? And I could hear you, right? Which was so fascinating to me, and such a skill and a talent. Like, where did you get all of that from?
Well, I've always just tried to talk to my friends. So if you were out front as one of my friends, I was telling everybody else about how cool what you were doing, was on the program. All I was really doing was describing one friend to another. And as more people listened, hey, that just made it even better for, the energy. But really, I like to talk to one or two people around the racetrack and describe what our mutual friend is doing. And then everybody else is really just kind of listening.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, because then it's personal, right?
Yes. Yeah. Because you and I would talk, me and other racers would speak today. Now it's drivers. And you learn things about their personal passion that you can translate in a positive way to let others see a little bit more of the peel back of the onion and get to know them as a person, and maybe like them even more from what they're doing phenomenally on the course of competition to what they do as a person that makes them interesting and unique.
And you've had an opportunity to call some really big races as far as BMX goes. We're not going to get to the car stuff just yet, but you've had the opportunity to call some big events, some of the biggest events outside of the Olympics, because we weren't around for that part of it. But you've called some big stuff, man.
Well, in the '80s, nobody crossed the demilitarized zone, if you will. You had ABA in the West, had NBL in the East. and there was no crossing, barbed wire, punji sticks, everything. Well, for whatever reason, I didn't have to cross that. The ABA called and opened the gates up for me. For 3 years, I got to be an ABA and NBL announcer, and they just dealt with it. They knew one was doing the other and such, and it was awesome. I got to go to Hawaii with the ABA, got to do 3 back-to-back-to-back Grand Nationals for both sanctions when nobody crossed. They had it. And I'll tell you, the influencer that pushed that button, Russ Akawa. Russ Akawa and Mongoose started using me. And when ABA had a Mongoose race for the first time that I worked ABA, Russ said, this guy takes care of every sponsor. We're going to be paying you as Mongoose, but for the sport itself, it won't matter that Mongoose riders are in second and he's only going to speak about them. If it's Redline, if it's Elf, it's whatever, he's going to mention them, and that will grow the sport. And when they got to hear me do that, even though it would be at a Mongoose race, the ABA understood that I'm there for the greater good. And that's what brought us together. So I was fortunate to do those. Even got to do mountain bike races when John Tomac raced mountain bikes. Got to go to Sun Valley, Idaho, to the World Championships of mountain biking in '88. Just amazing stuff that a kid from Hollywood, Florida should have never been able to do, but we found ways to do it.
Well, I disagree with you on that because you're far too talented to not be doing what you did and what you're doing now. So let's make that transition from bikes to cars. How did that come about? And what was the input? Because to me, it's very similar, right? Only you don't have 30 seconds to call an event. You've got a much longer time, right?
Well, you've got a much longer time, except for the part of motorsports that I started in, which is drag racing.
So less time.
Less time than even a BMX race. I am a ad in a newspaper for an assistant drag racing announcer at my home track in Hollywood, Florida. So I go out there and the guy makes me sit down. I've got all these, world championships and everything in BMX. And I sit down until the end of the night when the motorcycles come up. And he goes, here, kid, give this a try. And it sounded pretty good because I knew Honda, I knew Kawasaki, I knew Yamaha. I could kind of make that good. So he goes, hey, come back and we'll start using you when I'm tired. You can, announce. Well, the next week, he gives me the microphone when cars are on the racetrack. Now, I've spent my life telling people about Cook Brothers, about Redline, Webco, whatever. I've never talked about these brands that are on these cars that get us there. So somebody had to stand next to me and say, that's a Ford. That's a Chevy. No. And we were seeing the back end of the cars, so they would be taking off. And I couldn't tell a 69 Camaro from a 69 Mustang from the taillights like they could. But, I could. So it took a real growth to be able to understand the car matrix. And maybe, and I think it is, why I focused on the humans. If the guy said, I'm Bob Smith, a plumber from Hialeah, and I'm racing, Daryl Brown, a electrician from Fort Lauderdale, well, now I got 2 different trades. I got 2 different counties, 2 different cities, and I can work on that. And if I can read down and see if they're in a Ford or a Chevy, I might, talk about that. So, I got to feel it like we feel BMX. You were a rider from Illinois, and that had its own racing group that ran in Illinois, and your friends were Illinois. And if I wanted to talk about you there, I had to, say something to, Frank Nuccio and the Nuccio clan that knew you and things like that, Sundance, the Midwest guys. And that's kind of how you did, or I started doing drag racing. So it was a neat 3 years of doing that.
I did not know that part. I did not know that story. That is so cool. So cool. So you went from Florida. Did you move directly from Florida to North Carolina and got into the whole NASCAR world, or what was that transition like?
So while I was starting to show promise as a drag racing announcer, people started coming up to me saying, you still need to go auto racing in stock cars. And we really need to back up just a bit because the transition occurred at a BMX track first. So it wasn't just I answered a ad in a newspaper for a backup drag racing announcer. The reason I did, at Peachtree City in 1986, I was sitting there between motos that I was announcing, and this man came up to me and said, "You've got a really good voice. You could do car racing." And I said, "Well, I don't really, as it proved out, know a lot about cars." He said, "Well, you make more money." I said, "Oh, you mean like Richard Petty and the Goodies Headache Machine?" Somehow that came out of my mouth, and that was Randy Edwards, the father of John Edwards. John Edwards, racer at the time, riding for MCS, and his dad was a weekend warrior that flipped the caution lights at different NASCAR races. So he was up there in the tower with the Barney Halls and such, and he said, "You should do that." So he got me opportunities, opened doors, pushed me to kick them down if I wasn't. "Don't be timid. You're going to hear no. Just keep going. I'll get somebody else to at least listen to you." And while he was doing that, I was doing my own bit of pushing at Hialeah Speedway in Florida, got an opportunity there. So I started doing circle track racing until the drag strip found out, and it wasn't like ABA and MDL. The drag strip said, "Stop that oval stuff." So, but they didn't say stop trying to go to North Carolina because they didn't really know about it. So I was checking in with a guy named Doug Rice and a guy named Mark Garrow, who is PRN and PRN, but at the time Garrow had his own group. And they let me audition a couple of times up here in North Carolina. Within that audition time and being able to do it, I met two of the great influencers in my life. Bill Hennessy, who was from Myrtle Beach, who was directing one of these broadcasts, and Pat Patterson, who still today is on Sirius XM, still today lets me on Saturdays at 9:45 give a grassroots racing report. Those two guys there were the ones that, even though Garrow and Rice let me in the door, gave me the first opportunity, they gave me the next level opportunity. Oh. And Pat and Hennessy really started to mold the person I was. And Pat let me go with him in the 1990 Daytona 500 speed week, and be an assistant to him. So as an assistant to Pat Patterson, who was a huge celebrity at the time, we were down at Daytona, and at night, like 6, 7 o'clock, Pat would have a radio show at a local bar. And in the morning, he'd have another one at a local pancake house. So I got to stand up at the bar in a really bad blue suit with a really lame tie that was probably off to the side, and talk to race fans about, here comes Pat, and he's going to be talking to Neil Bonnet. So give him a round of applause. And I got to do that. Well, by the end of the week, Pat said, "Hey, I don't want to get up for breakfast on Friday. You go with the other guys, and you can take my spot for an hour on this breakfast show, because it's not going to have too many stars. It'll be something you can do, kid." And he gave me that chance, and I got to talk. So all that kind of finished up. I go home from Daytona, and I'm excited, but I don't really have anything in my hands. What am I going to do? I'm back in Florida. I want to get to North Carolina. I'm still crying. I'm still trying to get people to look at me. "Hey, help me out. Let me get up there." Nothing's happening. A couple of weeks before Easter, sometime in March, at night, phone rings. It's Pat Patterson. "What does Mr. Patterson want?" Says, "Well, I know that there's an opening now at the track in Rockingham. We do a lot together. They're my friends. You need to go up there next week, and you need to sit, and you need to say yes, sir, no, sir, and be as polite as possible, because I'm going to give them such a great recommendation. Unless you blow this up, you're going to be able to get this job." So I go up there, drive all the way up to North Carolina, haven't been to Rockingham, and it's way out in the boonies in my eyes, kid from Florida. And I get to talk to these first generation NASCAR owners and the president of the track. I mean, they were there and the roots growing of NASCAR. They knew it from Big Bill France. So I'm trying to yes, sir, no, sir, and be as nice as I can. And the funniest part of the story, L.G. DeWitt, who owned the track, I got to meet him on the last day up there, because the president of the track, Frank Wilson, who became one of these influencers in my life, had approved me. But LG owned the track, And LG was just a few months away from passing away, but he wanted to come in and see who this PR man was going to be. So he gets there and he says, you like this boy, Frank? Yep. You're sure? Yep. So he calls me up to the desk. He says, son, Frank likes you. I like you, but you got to sign this piece of paper. Now all of us would think it's a contract. I look down, blank, totally blank, nothing there. So I sign it. He looks at it. All right, Frank, was it that I could write cursive? I don't know. He passed away. Was my entire fate on whether I could write cursive. But that's how that happened. And come to find out, back in the drag racing stuff, Rockingham had a dragway. And they wanted somebody to look after it while they helped on the stock car side. So I got to run the drag strip as well as help out on the stock car side. So all of the soup kept mixing and matching and blending together. And those were those roots days around 1990, 91 that, I became the launch pad for a much bigger career.
What I think is fascinating, and I've seen this in myself as well, how you made it to Rockingham, still announcing, still doing that, but then you kind of got out of it and we're actually working at Richard Childress Racing, not announcing, not doing anything else. But then over time, you're back into it and doing the thing that you love to do. And I really think what you're called to do. I mean, you're so talented at it, and it's so seamless to watch you announce. When I see you on TV or I hear you on the radio or I hear you on satellite radio, it's so smooth and so good the way that you present it. It makes sense as to why you're still doing it.
Well, thank you. What I've tried to develop is a style of announcing that is more conversational, more curious. When I want to raise inflection or give a little bit more dart to what I'm doing, I can do that. But I like talking to people, and even talking with huge crowds. You can have a conversation with a crowd more so than, are you ready? The simple things. You can develop a way to chat with them through the circumstances in front of you and get them to react. So the more I can bring it into a personal thing to where I'm maybe up in a booth, but I'm really the guy sitting next to you and we're talking about what we're seeing here and getting excited together about what's going on out there. So hopefully that does translate to a lot of people. But I got to share with you a couple of things on the transition from Rockingham.
Please.
Let's see, it's the end of 95 and I'm getting interviewed by Childress. But I'm also had just finished an audition with TNN with Mike Hogwood, who was a legend in Greensboro, and went on, did major basketball, did all kinds of stuff. I was play-by-play. Hogwood was the color commentator. And we had this guy running around the pits. This was at Hickory. We did a ghost match, a dark match, if you will. And the guy running around the pits was this guy named Steve Burns. So Bernie, Hogg, and I were going to be with Patty Wheeler as the third team if TNN needed anybody for some of their secondary races. We weren't going to be the top team because Steve had his show and Hogg had his, but we were going to be there as that next level group when they wanted to fire, not fire, but put somebody wherever they wanted. So I was a big decision. I got Childress. I'm at the Waldorf talking to him about going racing, and I might have this career that I've dreamed of all my life to go with TNN. But I also thought, I can't be sure. Third string is not first string, and this might not ever happen. And Childress and a guy named Earnhardt are going to Japan.
Ooh,
now I
Suzuka.
A lot of guys in BMX going off to all over the world, and I wanted to go to Japan. So I went. I got to go with Childress, go to Japan, win races in Japan, and do all of those amazing things. And you talk about an influencer. The things I learned from Richard Childress and being there within the storm that was Dale Earnhardt in the 90s and all the things coming at us. and all the different business things that were going on. Don Hawk, who was Dale's business manager, the amazing things that I got to learn from him. Those were opportunities that, again, I'm just pinching myself. Hey, I just wanted to go to Japan like my BMX buddies, and I ended up being able to do it with NASCAR. But to have Richard Childress teach me that millions of dollars in sponsorship and hundreds of dollars in BMX sponsorship are relatively the same. You got to treat the sponsor well. You got to work harder than the money number. But at the end of the day, it is just a number. It's really about what you promise and what you deliver. Don't worry. Don't be focused on, is it $5 million or whatever? Be worried about, can I succeed with this package that I'm offering? Can I do more than this package? Can I make sure that they're happy? And once you get past 7 figures being scary, you can cut deals with anybody, or I felt that way because I wasn't worried about the numbers. I was making sure that whatever I told them, we could deliver and then some. And Childress was just a great part of that as a mentor, to be able to spend time with him. The day in February of '01 changed all that. We had such a terrible year. We lost our focal point, our magnet, our hero. And it just never picked back up from there. A year and a week to the day, I knew it was over. I knew it was over probably 3 months in, that it just, my heart wasn't in it, and a lot of other hearts were not in it either. We had lost. So I left Childress, and Annette, my wife, said, hey, build me a garden, do things. And my wife is Annette, 20 years now. What a great influencer she's been. She's not a big motorsports fan, but a lifestyle fan, a culture as far as art and painting and things like that, and cats. I never thought I'd like cats, but now we got cats here. But the things I've learned from my wife, Annette, have been a big influence on me. How to be a father. I didn't know how to be a dad of a baby when we adopted Jacob. So those were big parts. But I started doing things, to kind of filter through the pain of losing Dale and the transition of not being with my friends from Richard Childress Racing, because the pain there was just too much for me. And then the phone started ringing, and one of those phone calls was Steve Post. Eventually, Steve called and said, I got my co-announcer is not going to complete the year with us. Will you come and do Legends racing with me? And I thought, wow, I haven't really announced in a long time. I'd love to. And I love Steve. Steve's so awesome. I got to go play with Steve. So that was kind of the rebirth as an announcer from there.
Man, that is such a fantastic story. I love what you were saying about the customer service portion, whether it's $100 or $100 million. Do you find that you gained a lot of that experience from when you were racing BMX back in the day? Because we had to treat our sponsors right?
You had to. If you wanted a 10% discount at Mike's Cyclery, like we got, in my or you wanted free pair of Tough Wheels or whatever, you had to go find somebody that was going to buy 2 or 3 sets of Tough Wheels so that they could get them back. And all the rest, Torker and all the different companies that I was a part of on the sponsorship side, they really were the foundation of the things I do in motorsports. BMX reflected the foundation of what I brought to motorsports, and then great influencers focused me back on how each segment of my career has been. They gave me a lot of influence to be successful. Even at Rockingham, I had a Marine drill sergeant as our food and beverage guy. So he was around a lot, and I got to really learn from him how to be honorable and how to make sure that no matter what happened, we did it with distinction. Just a great guy that took care of me as a father. My father died in '88. So this didn't happen as somebody who had a dad that gave him these things. I was wandering through life trying to find these things and found people. My luck has been finding people that have good hearts, that want to share and be influencers that I'll never forget.
Well, I'll never forget you calling my name when I was on the track. That was huge for me. That was always a pleasure, because in my era, you were one of the best. There was a lot of announcers, but man, you were at the top. There's no question. If there's one thing about your BMX career, what one thing would you like to use as your topper? Let me guess, Hall of Fame.
Yes, got to be. Charlie Liskey and I were friends. Linda Dorsey and I were friends. The list of other announcers that's in there, we were all pals. But because, as I said, there was nobody in the 80s that broke through that demilitarized zone between the ABA and NBL. The races in the 80s, when BMX was at its roaring peak back then, and really I say it was even more so than now, and the great things that they're doing now and the courses and the stuff like that. But in those middle 80s, there was no voice other than mine that people wanted. And I hope that they'll remember that at the Hall of Fame and be able to, have me break through that one last thing that would put the capper on it. Because I love BMX. I still love BMX. I have somewhere behind me my first trophy still from back in the day. I've got a trophy from 78, one from 79 back there. Amazing. Those things never leave me. BMX has never left me. And when I talk to car racers that have done it, instantly the bond is there. We talk about pedaling it still. I hope the Hall of Fame will find a way to slide me in there with the racers that I announced in the 70s and 80s. And be able to be there alongside them.
I think it would be very well deserved. And if someone wants to listen to you now, where do they need to tune in to hear your voice?
Well, as you were talking about social media, that's the first place I always send people. PRN's at the Track on Twitter is my show. It's a weekly show. It's on 70 stations in 14 states. It's all about grassroots car racing. So they can hear about that. They can follow us on Facebook and Instagram as well. Our shows are heard not only on those broadcast stations, but at goprn.com and on iTunes. Plus, you can download the free PRN app and be able to get us right there on your smartphone. PRN's at the Track, grassroots racing's big friend. We have a relentless passion for it.
Excellent. I'm sure you're going to get plenty of people that are going to want to listen in and probably reach out to you from back in the day that haven't had a chance to speak with you in quite some time.
Well, I'm glad we got to speak, Craig. This is an awesome project, and the list of people, I hope that anybody that tuned in to hear what we were chatting about goes and looks into the file and sees those influencers that you've brought together here. This is awesome, and thank you for having me on.
Anytime. We'll have to have you back on again at some point because this could be a much longer conversation, I'm sure.
I look forward to it.
Absolutely. Lenny, thank you again for your time today. If you guys like what you're seeing, please make sure you subscribe here on YouTube or go on over to Apple Podcasts and subscribe there. Lenny, have a fantastic day. And man, one of these days we're going to get together and get that coffee.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Take care.